early. We were up about 150, 170 points on the NASDAQ. About the first hour or so, gave all that back up and then just kind of bounced around for most of the day, up about 30, maybe 50 points there in that sort of a range, only to finish in the red. On the other hand, you look over at the Dow and the S&P, and they were sprinting to the upside. You had the Dow and the S&P up about 1%, a little bit more than 1% on the Dow itself, but the Dow early on is up 230, then it's up 350, then it's up 460 by midday, and a really, really nice close. So the stock or that particular index closed at record highs. So that was pretty interesting to see, because that change, and matter of fact, when you looked at the components of the Dow during the day, about midday I looked, and there were only two stocks that were in the red. That was Apple and that was Microsoft. Later on, they got joined by Intel and United Health, but those were the only names that were in the red. And obviously makes a lot of sense when you look over at the NASDAQ, and it's actually struggling somewhat. We did have volatility in a really, really compact, tight range yesterday. As a matter of fact, closing in the 22s. And it was interesting because the volatility, when you consider some of the intraday moves that we were seeing, particularly on the Dow, you would almost expect to see a little bit higher volatility than we're seeing. I've been saying that for a while now, and we still haven't been seeing that, but it does give you a little insight that we might be ready to see this volatility index at some point pop to the upside. We'll see if that happens. So, leadership, financials, Capital One, PNC, US Bank, Wells Fargo, all screaming to the upside. Morgan Stanley, Goldman Sachs, Citi, all those names had an unbelievable day. We also look over at the material space. You see names like Freeport-McMoRan, Cliffs, those kinds of names definitely participating really nicely. It seemed as if it was the big cap names when you go over to the energy space that were actually moving the needle there. That was Chevron, Exxon, Conoco, those kind of names. Industrials, Boeing has been on fire, and we've been talking about the unusual option activity in Boeing for a while now. By the way, that's a little teaser. We might even have a little bit more today. Anyway, Boeing, 3M, you got Dow, all of that participating really, really nicely. Semiconductors, not so great yesterday. I was down about 2%. You look over at biotech, it was the one spot of the NASDAQ, those three major components. Biotech actually did finish in the green, but just barely. And then you look over at the NASDAQ, and that finished, the technology space finished not so great. So this morning, it's pretty interesting because S&P really hasn't moved a whole lot. It made a jump early on in the pre-market, up about 0.7%, so just under 1%. And it's kind of hung around in that level since the open, just kind of moving along. Matter of fact, the last I looked, it was up about 32 points. I look over at the Dow, on the other hand, it's just been steadily kind of moving to the upside, along with the NASDAQ, which actually started out strong. It started up about 1.7% in the pre-market, about 1.5% from here on out. And they're both up almost identically, about 208 points apiece the last I looked. So that was pretty interesting. You got crude now back and holding in that 65 range. You got volatility, as I mentioned. That came down a little bit more. So I've been wrong about where I think that it really should be. We'll see over time. But it's a little bit underneath 22. We had the unemployment claims. They're a little bit lower than expected. It was a 4-month low. So that was something that gave a little bit of a boost probably to the markets, at least a little encouragement. You got the 10-year trading about 1.5. Technology, that was leading early. It was up about 1.7%, but then you got the semiconductors up about 3%. I looked over at biotech. That was up about 2%. Consumer discretionary and materials, they were performing very nicely, up about 1%. Actually, the one area that I was just highlighting a second ago about yesterday, the financials, that was the one area where we were seeing a little bit of red, a little bit of a pullback, and understandably so after the sprint that they've been on of late. So that's something. How about Freeport Mac? That thing's been on fire and absolutely exploded this morning, up about 7%. We got Apple was up about 2%. I talked about yesterday, it was kind of lagging. Boeing adding 2, 3, 4%, somewhere crazy. It hit a 52-week high. I believe 256.65 is the level. Now, the interesting thing is, as I was taking off positions today, lo and behold, they came back in for more Boeing. But this was expiring tomorrow Boeing. So not a lot of conviction about how long this is going to run, but just continuing to see that activity there and the bullish activity coming into that specific name. So a couple unusuals. We'll get out of here. I am not on today. I'm not on tomorrow. I got kind of a nice free week, actually, and it gives me a good opportunity. I am doing a podcast tomorrow. I'll update you when we do the take tomorrow. So first one, Kopin Corp. This is an electronic components company. Very rarely have we seen, as a matter of fact, we've seen it twice on our unusual scanners since we've started, and one of them was just at the very beginning of February. So it's hitting again. So this is the second time. Stock was trading about $9.85. We had a buyer of 10,800 of the March 12.5 calls. Started at 20 cents, paid all the way up to 70 cents. So I think you can be a little bit patient, but it's a size trade, and it's unusual because we don't see this name very often. So that one definitely stood out for me. GE also stood out, and this one, and I don't do this very often, but for a long period of the time, people have watched, and I've been talking for multiple years about GE. GE was up towards 30 when we started seeing massive put buying. And boy, were they right. And they continued to roll down. And when I say massive, 50,000, 100,000, 70,000, just incredible buyers of puts looking for downside. Boy, did they ever get it. Got all the way down into the single digits. As a matter of fact, got underneath, I believe, 6 or right around the 5s or something like that. And it didn't really turn around with the option flow until relatively recently. And then we've had a nice little bit of a move to the upside, and we've seen a lot of positive option paper there. I just recently took off a position with some long calls. Well, today, some strong put activity in there. So Monday, this stock was $14. It was over $14. It was a one-year high. Today, it's trading $12.30, and I see 20,000 of the March 12.5 puts trading for 30 cents up to 50 cents. So not the same size, I grant you that, but 20,000 is decent size for sure. And are we starting to see a turn there again? I don't know, but I just wanted to flag that one for you just to give you an idea that we are seeing some very large put activity, which we had not been seeing. It had been calls, and a whole lot of bullish paper on this little bit of a run up from, call it 8 to that 14 level. But now we're seeing these puts come right back again. So pretty interesting to see that. Folks, knowledge is king. You have to really understand the derivatives markets as best you can. It will make it a lot easier for you to navigate yourself and understand some of the pricing and all the rest of that. And most importantly, you got to be disciplined as well. You got to have the educational level. You got to have the discipline side. If you've got that, you've got a much better recipe for something that could be a lot closer to some good success. Have a great day of trading. Look forward to seeing you tomorrow on The Take. And I'll tell you about that podcast that I got later on in the day. And that'll be getting taped tomorrow as well. Folks, have a great day of trading.